I think being patient and kind to yourself, especially because sometimes a restart can be slow. And I think sometimes for whatever reason we like put this like sense of urgency on ourselves that like, oh, I have to get back to how things were before. But like sometimes that takes time and like sometimes you can't get back to how things were before. And so you have to appreciate that like you might be moving into a new direction. Because you don't have the obviously the exact same social life as you used to. So I think being patient with yourself and being kind to yourself in that process is going to be really important.
Welcome back to Cultural Collision. I'm Victoria.
And I'm EJ.
Today, we are exploring a topic that affects us all, friendships. Friendships are essential to our well being, but sometimes they can be challenging. How do we communicate effectively with friends? How do we know when it's time to move on? And how can we end a friendship with grace and respect? Join us as we dive into the complexities of friendships, offering insights and advice of navigating these important relationships.
What are some signs that a friendship might no longer be serving us in a positive way?
I think for me personally, if my friend giving me negative interactions or like, they are frequent criticism, like judgment, they are challenging you, all the behaviors where they are asking questions like you don't like, and they don't respect you as who you are, and they want to change you. This sounds like a romantic relationship. It's also part of the relationship. I think one of the most important thing is my friend and I are growing apart. So we our priorities are different. We chase different things in life. We're working on different paths. That's like a biggest difference when we and when my friends and I had difference. I think it's really hard to communicate to each other and still be we can still be friends, but is I think it's not something in a positive way, but like, it's not like serving at all. That's how I feel. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like um it's interesting that you said like when people try to change you. I feel like that's a big part of it. You know, you definitely want friends who are gonna accept you for who you are. And as you change and grow. For me, I feel like when you get to a place where there's a lack or an unwillingness to understand the other person, and I don't mean like you have to agree with them, like you can be friends and disagree, but I think you have to be able to listen to understand. So if there's a lack of understanding or lack of empathy or an unwillingness to like try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, I feel like there might be a cause of concern. I would say any sort of behavior of repeated disrespect. Um, and sometimes it can be small and petty. And so you want to like, oh, they're just joking, or like maybe it's not that big of a deal. But I feel like if it's a repeated thing, it might be time to evaluate that. And then violations of trust. I feel like that could be confidentiality. I feel like some people get into boy code, girl code, things you're not supposed to do to friends, to each other. But I feel like, yeah, that can definitely add a fissure to a relationship and have you evaluate, is this somebody who I want to like still keep in my orbit?
Yeah, definitely. We're talking about a lot of things related to communication because, like, if you feel untrusted or like judgmental, right? I think one way is effective communication. That is the key to any relationship. What are some strategies for having difficult conversations with friends? Have you ever encountered like the situations like when you try to have an honest conversation with friends and they don't want to listen?
Yes. I think if it's a conversation that is one that you like don't know what's going to come up. Sometimes these conversations come up spontaneously and like those can be difficult. Um, and so I would say like if this was like a planned conversation you were going to have with someone, I would say definitely rehearse your key points, not necessarily to memorize what you're going to say or to be perfect, but to avoid like your nerves or your emotions overriding your point when it comes to it. I think that practicing writing things out can really help. Um, I would say listen with the intent to understand and not to rebuttal is also really important. That's something that I felt like I always grew up hearing is, people are like so excited to like talk back and get at you because they've thought of a rebuttal. And when you're always thinking of the rebuttal, you're not actually listening to what the person is trying to say. Um, and then I think, especially if the conversation does come up spontaneously, I think it's easy for emotions to come up and things to escalate pretty quickly. And so sometimes I think it's important to know when you need to take a break. And maybe you can come back to the conversation, right? Maybe you don't have to like talk through it the whole time. Maybe you said, like, hey, I noticed things are getting a little high. Why don't we like take a breather and come back down and then return to the conversation?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good one. Yeah, because like when you're talking to friends, when they are not prepared for what you're going to say, and like they're not prepared for an honest conversation, and they got like affected, and they're like, "You are judging me." Then
Mhm.
take a pause is a really good strategy. I think and the meanwhile is like when you have the conversation, don't be too direct and focus on the thing is not instead of the person, right? Focus on what you're trying to say, what you're trying to address here. And instead of like judging your friends or like saying you are doing this wrong, it's not like there's no right or wrong. So just focus on the things you want to address. And also like I think is very important is to set boundaries. So what kind of conversation we can have if I want to be involved or you want to involve me in your like life stories, what kind of conversation, what kind of things we can share, and what other things you just want venting. You don't want anything. I don't want your feedback. I don't want you like give me advice. I just want venting. So that's very important to set boundaries and make sure you are all clear, both clear and do not have like any conflict because I like the boundaries unclear.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Yeah, boundaries can be so great. And sometimes, boundaries don't always work or these techniques don't work. And you realize that you have to move on from that person or that friendship. And that can be difficult. So, what are some indicators that it might be time to let go of a friendship?
I think we don't really give up on friendship when we see red flags. So it's an add up experience. So when we see this, maybe like when we interact with each other, we found, oh, okay. So you don't respect me, or you don't really, you just want to talk, you just want to talk, and you don't listen to what I say, and you don't respect me, or you don't take my advice seriously. I feel unvalued. So I don't feel like supporting by friends, right? That can be like all the red flags. So similar to relationships, or like sometimes doesn't have to be a red flag. Like I mentioned at the beginning, right? Like going apart, we're on different paths, we're pursuing for different lifestyles, we're like our priorities are different, right? And we feel like we don't have like so much common topics to talk about. And that can be like indicators for us to move on. But I also think is the difference between relationship and friendship is we don't really have to say goodbye to friends. We have a closure, so-called closure with friends because you don't know like people are changing. Maybe like a couple months later, even a couple years later, and you interact with each other, you find, oh, okay, we have more common topics now, and then we can be good friends. So I think that's like one very different things compared to the relationships. What
Yeah,
do you think?
yeah. I absolutely agree. I mean, it's such a true and like optimistic way to think about it. I think especially in terms of the fact that like just because it seems like there's going to be distance or uh like you're growing apart in a friendship now doesn't necessarily mean that that's like forever and that there's room for you to come back to each other. So that's a really interesting thing I think to note. Yeah, I mean I think outside of major life changes which you touched on, I think that sometimes there are like situational friendships that end up happening, which I think are maybe different from like your maybe more traditional friendship, is that like maybe you have, someone who you are really good friends with because you used to work together. and then that person goes to a different job or you go to a different job, and it's, um, but other than that, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that, like, if it's not major life changes, if it's not your values aren't in alignment, I feel like it's pretty, those are probably the big things that come up that I think would really cause someone to decide to move on from a friendship.
Yeah, we're talking about ending a relationship, right? It's not like, even though we don't really end, we're talking like, I don't want to be friends with you. We're not like that young age. We call 绝交. We no
Mm.
longer talk to you, right? It's not like we passed that stage. But still, like ending a friendship can be emotionally taxing. So what are some ways to cope with the feeling that comes with ending a relationship?
Um, I would say sort of similar to what you said about the potential for there to be a renewal in the friendship later. I believe in the sort of this idea of never say never. I don't know. I'm pretty someone who believes in the power or the potential of rehabilitation and reconciliation, right? So even if you like things ended on bad terms, right? That doesn't mean that you can't reconcile and rehabilitate one day in the future. And so I think that that could help with some of the having optimism can, I think, can help with deal with some of that sort of emotional distress that comes with it. Um, I think being mindful of the spectrum of experiences that you had in that friendship is really important. I think sometimes when things come to an end, that like you tend to focus on the bad things or whatever caused it to come to the end, and sometimes it's harder to keep in mind the full spectrum of the experience, and so giving yourself perspective. I think also sometimes like wishing the other person well can be or can be good because I think it's sort of it releases you from that, I don't know, that negative headspace and wanting to attach negativity to them. And so I think that can be helpful for me in the past. I don't know. What about you?
I think for me, it's very different. When I was in my 20s, I think friends are everything. So they are very close to me. I need to talk to my friends every single day, especially for the ones like maybe like you mentioned at work, because we see each other every day and we have a lot to talk about, like work related or like non-work related. And then if I lose a friend at work, I will feel so sad. I think by then is acknowledging your emotions is very important. And what's going on with the friendship, like reflect on this like on this relationship. And for me, I think when I was 20s, I need to create new routine to be patient with myself. Now I lose someone who I can talk every single day, so who else I can talk to, right? I need to create a new habit and to have a new life for myself.
Mhm.
Like I think that's when I was 20. Then when I was like now, when I was in my 30s, I think we can't really talk to our friends every single day, right? So like, just say only talk to them when they have time and respect each other, have their own business, have their own like, things to work on. Mm, nowadays, it's not like you also mentioned, it's not like ending a relationship. You can see this as in the long term. It's just now pick up a house, right? Right now, we are not on the same page and on the same stage. But like, maybe some days later, you can just reconnect. You can talk to each other. Just see things differently. So what I see the relationship, if I want to end a relationship, I will maybe take it as a pause of a relationship.
Are you someone who, when you come to an end of a relationship or a friendship, are you someone who feels like you have to like avoid them on social media and block their phone numbers and things like that and like, do a clean sweep of them?
I think both in the romantic relationship and friendship, I don't have the urge of doing that. Because like, even though we might not see each other anymore, but if they post on social media, I still like their posts because we used to be good friends. Nowadays, we just maybe are just normal friends, but we still can be friends later. Yeah.
Hmm.
How about you?
I guess it depends. I think for me, sometimes, depending on the nature of the relationship, sometimes I do need like a clean break. I think sometimes like seeing them triggers me, can be triggering. And it's not because it's like necessarily something bad happened, it's that like is a reminder that like the thing has come to an end, and like I don't know, sometimes it feels like a fresh wound. I need like a bit more time to heal and then I can come back into it. But yeah, it depends. I was just curious.
Yeah. Okay. After ending a friendship, how can we focus on rebuilding our social circles and forming new connections? Like you said, if you don't, you want to block them, right? Then you need to create new social circles. So, what are the ways you are creating new social circles for yourself?
Hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting because you talked about like before, like having to build a new routine, things like that. And I feel like that's something that I've had to do. And like understandably, putting yourself out there sometimes can be like really hard. So I found has been helpful is like identifying things that you feel comfortable doing alone versus activities you feel like you need to do with someone else. Because like if the goal is just to get out there and like, you know, be around different people, there's tons of things that are very great to do on your own versus there's some things you might want to do with someone else. And so if you need someone else, setting up an accountability buddy system with a friend to hold you and your friend accountable can really be important to help you show up for yourself. Even like the smallest things like just showing up to an event. You can always leave early. You don't have to stay the whole thing, but I think it's important to just like go and get out there. I think being patient and kind to yourself, especially because sometimes a restart can be slow. And I think sometimes for whatever reason we like put this like sense of urgency on ourselves that like, oh, I have to get back to how things were before. But like sometimes that takes time and like sometimes you can't get back to how things were before. And so you have to appreciate that like you might be moving into a new direction. Because you don't have the obviously the exact same social life as you used to. So I think being patient with yourself and being kind to yourself in that process is going to be really important.
I totally agree about like going out is very important. I remember like when I first moved to Singapore, I don't have any friends. Then I kind of like ask people around if they know someone in Singapore and they just try to introduce me to their friends in Singapore. And I go out there to meet different friends. And that's how I have a very good friend like in Singapore, how I met her and how we have become good friends. That's very important. Like also like you mentioned, it sometimes it can be very hard because like you go out there and you don't know this person. Is it like very very it's very new environment, right? You don't know
Hmm.
anyone, and it can be very like intimidating because you feel like oh my God, who am I gonna talk to? Like I don't know anyone here, but like going to that kind of place several times, I think you are able to meet someone. That's very important, right? And at the meantime, like be positive. Even though you don't have a very close friend, you don't have a friend in a like new place, new country, new city, don't be afraid. So find out I totally agree with you. Like find out the things you can do by yourself. Like maybe watch a movie or cook a meal for yourself. Treat yourself well and find your passion. Join like activity groups. And then you'll find friends with common hobbies. It's easy to make connection with those kind of like friends. So be out there and be brave. I think that's very important. Like you want to moving forward.
So, what role do boundaries play in maintaining healthy friendships, and how can we establish them effectively?
Well, I think this is very important because I can give you an example. So, which happened a month ago after I moved back to Beijing. So, I have a very, very good friend. So, we talk to each other so often. And I know something bad happened to her. So she's been like emotionally and not happy for a long time. So every time we talk and we met each other, and she always talk about this thing. So this bad thing happened to her, right? And then I realized, I also talked to her. It was like, I know this thing happens to you. I'm so sorry for that. You have to move on, or you have to find a way to get over with it. Um, I don't want the people around me who are always have negative thoughts, have negative words. Like people's energy is very important. I want to keep a positive energy. Even being with you, I want to influence you by my positive energy. I know everyone has encountered a lot of sad things, bad things, but I don't want this negative energy be around it. And no one can save you out of the situation. You just have to save yourself. And I kind of say like I don't want you to do this to yourself, be in a like negative bubble and always be there, cannot get out. So I know she feels like unhappy at the moment when I talk to her about this, but also I feel relieved because I really want good thing happen to her. I really want her to get out of the situation and not be like just always be there, cannot get out. And she used to like I also told her like she used to look very young and she very positive and very like in a positive like naive in a good way. But now she has changed. I feel like how you think will change how you look. That's not a good sign. So as a good friend, I want you to be healthy. I want you to be happy, but I cannot help you so much. I can talk to you, I can listen to you, but you cannot keep talking this all the time, right? That cannot be the only important thing you want to say when we met each other. We're like, I want to hear like different aspects of your life, right? That's something like I realize boundary is so important. And I don't want like, it's not about this person, right? I communicate, I talk to her, it's about this situation. You have to get out of this situation. I understand and respect and I know like the bad things happens, right? So um, I think so. I was trying to be clear and I have this open communication. So yeah, we still are very good friends. I don't think I broke anything between me and her, but like, I think in her mind, so I set this boundary. So I haven't talked to her after this communication, like really about the situation. So but I think I made my point clear. I want us to be good friends, but I also want to stay a healthy boundary. I also want you to be positive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you made a couple of really good points. I think one, especially, you have to be willing to put in the work yourself or want to save yourself because people can't save you, right? Really important. I think also oh, just that you felt relieved, right? Like I think like sometimes having these that we've been talking about like how it can be difficult to have these conversations. I think sometimes the fear of having the difficult conversation can outweigh the actual relief that you would feel if you just said what you need to say and you said it clearly like you did. So, I think that relief part is important to remember because that's on the other side of sometimes the fear that we have when we need to communicate and have these important conversations. Um, yeah, I feel like boundaries are important to ensure that respect and communication are centered in relationships and friendships, and that they're not there to penalize someone or to shut someone out, but to establish the rules and values that will keep someone like in your circle and in your life. And I think sometimes that can be confusing for people. I think sometimes they feel like you set a boundary means putting up a wall and you're keeping them out and it's not a wall, right? It's like it's an expectation setting, it's a conversation, it's an expectation. So I don't know, I always find that to be interesting that people feel that way, but I think it's just how people conceptualize boundaries. um I think on the other side of that, I think for ourselves, we also need to be able to own when we've crossed a boundary maybe for someone else instead of being defensive or combative, because that can happen. And I think, I don't know, I think especially, I think most of us would like to think that we're good people and we don't cross other people's boundaries, but sometimes it happens. And so we have to be able to own that and take accountability for it. So I think that's important on the other side.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay. Yeah, because friendships are a vital part of our lives, right? But like all relationships, they can evolve and change. It's important to recognize when a friendship is no longer beneficial and to take the steps to address it with kindness and respect.
Remember, moving on from a friendship is not a failure, but an opportunity for growth and new connections. We hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights on navigating friendships. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll continue to explore topics that impact your life. Until next time, take care and nurture the friendships that bring joy and positivity to your life.
Bye.
Bye.